Greetings, everyone. This is Rock Most Talk with Weekly Comic Book Roundup. We've covered this week's X-Men books, as well as our miscellaneous Marvel books, as well as the first actual part of the War of the Bounty Hunters. Which brings us to our next video, and we'll be starting with Heroes Reborn number 5. So, what we've learned so far is that Mephisto is definitely involved and is as revered in the Heroes Reborn Earth as the Christian God is on most other Earths. So far, we've had issues focusing on Hyperion, Blur. And Dr. Prism, or Dr. Spectrum. Yeah, I'm trying to think. But, yeah, so there's some interesting things to say the least. So, this issue focuses on Nighthawk. Begins with Nighthawk on the trail of Kraven the Hunter. Kind of pulling a Kraven's Last Hunt with Nighthawk. So for those unaware, in the classic Spider-Man story, Kraven's Last Hunt, which would turn out to not be his last hunt, but that's neither here nor there. Kraven the Hunter defeated Spider-Man, buried him alive, and then went out into New York dressed as Spider-Man. Anyway, so here he's dressed as the Supreme Power iteration of Nighthawk, which it's a nice nod to Supreme Power. It really is. For those unaware, Supreme Power was a mature reader's version of the Squadron Supreme that was helmed by J. Mike Straczynski about in the early to early 2000s to probably up there 2010s. It crossed over with whereas the original Squadron Supreme crossed over with Earth 616, the regular Marvel Universe, the Squadron Supreme, or the Supreme Power Squadron, crossed over with the Ultimate Universe. And for a while, Ultimate Nick Fury worked with the Squadron. But, yeah, it had a more darker and even more brutal version of Nighthawk. It really leaned heavily on the it created an analog to the Joker, so on and so forth. But yeah, anyway, so Kraven's attacking the NYPD. However, while apparently Nighthawk is collecting, there's been a breakout at Ravenloft and at Ravencroft, and Nighthawk is getting everyone back at. Is trying to round everyone up. He goes to the asylum. Among those he faces off against are Sabretooth, Bullseye, the Lizard, Moon Knight, Black Skull, Dr. Octopus, and so forth. We also get a look at the Night Cave, which, much like the Bat Cave, has some interesting souvenirs and trophies, including the Winter Soldier's arm, that appears to be the Silver Samurai's helmet, the size of Elektra, the Hate Monger's hood. I think we've also got the Sin Eater's hood. But we also learned that Kyle Richmond is a delegate to the House of Representatives from the District of Columbia. We get a little backstory for 2 years earlier. Apparently, when Secret War happened, Nighthawk came back with an alien symbiote costume and realized very quickly that the suit is alive. But yeah, the symbiote wants to get back with Nighthawk, which does not make the which is not it's not an idea that the symbiote's current host, Johann Schmidt, the Red Skull, is too enthused about. Nighthawk also faces off against against Deadpool, Scarecrow, Rhino, and of course, his arch nemesis, the Goblin, who's taken Dr. Gwen Stacy prisoner. However, Nighthawk rescues her, and there's a flashback to the time that Goblin killed Sam Wilson. More on that later. But we find out that Gwen has been exposed to the Goblin's gas. Nighthawk restrains her, takes down Scarecrow and Goblin, but won't kill Goblin. Will not kill him. Because that's what he wants. Everyone, however, once all is said and done, everyone's rounded up for one escaped inmate, who actually escaped hours before the riot. Maya Lopez, aka Echo. Former soldier for Kingpin. He's looking through the various security footage angles, and he recognizes one of the people that helped Echo escape, Blade, but not the other. A bearded blonde man holding what appears to be a star-spangled shield. And our backup story is the Ronin's quest, quest of the Ronin. In D.C., Nighthawk is up against Ronin at the Washington Monument. And apparently, Ronin is trying to find the secrets of the world. But he escapes from, manages to teleport away from Nighthawk and ends up in Northeast Africa, where he probably disarms his defenses and explains that he found a celestial buried deep in the Arctic. Felt like it was calling to him. Ronan explains he managed to harness some of the power and technology, what he can understand at least, and to teleport himself from home without anyone realizing on his occasional sojourns, his quest for the truth. However, as Ronan is revealed to be Black Panther, he has two visitors, Blade and Captain America. And that is where the issue ends. Man, I swear, Heroes Reborn is so much better than any right to be. I'm loving both the A and B stories in each book. These backups where seeing the Avengers come together on this Earth. Oh, yeah. The Heroes Reborn one shot in a few weeks is going to be so good. Anyways, moving on to our next book, we've got Marvel Double Action. So this is this reprints Nighthawk number 126. The night Sam Wilson died. It's basically a play on the on Amazing Spider-Man number 121, 122, the night Gwen Stacy died. But Nighthawk returns from the Alternaverse and discovers that Harry Osborn is in a drug-induced in a coma after using super serum. His friends Sam Wilson and Gwen Stacy are looking in on him, As Kyle Richmond, he goes to look in on him as well. Um, but all three of them know that each of them have claim responsibility, but then they all come to the realization that no, the real culprit, the real responsible party is Norman Osborn, Harry's father. Um, we also get a look at this was $10 bills, which have Nick Fury on them instead of Andrew Jackson. Um, Also, every few pages we get these little ads at the bottom. I don't think I've ever actually read through any Bronze Age, Silver. That I haven't read through that many at least Silver or Bronze Age Marvel books. But yeah, you get things like "Don't blink or you'll miss him" every month in the Blur. Horrors unleashed when Ape meets Machine. Read the Revenge of Apex in the Haunting Hour #13. We also get some backstory. We get a condensed version of Nighthawk's history with the Goblin. How he broke into the Night Cave and he cracked, and Norman's skull was cracked. But Nighthawk managed to save his life, but he had amnesia, so it was all good. Then he met Sam Wilson, and well, yeah. But he pushed people away after that, including Zarda. It's kind of implied that Nighthawk and Zarda had a relationship. He then runs into Greer Grant, better known as Tigra, and it turns out Tigra is actually in the Heroes Reborn universe, basically Cheetah to Zarda's Wonder Woman. Back at the hospital, Norman Osborn gets his memory back. Goblin's out. Delegate Richmond proposes a bill. Basically, the bill basically. The message is simple. The bill would limit how far the squadron Supreme can go in solving problems. They can use their power to save us from forces that would disrupt our society, but they can't determine the course of our culture. They can use their strength to fight crime, but they can't make a decision for us about what justice is. Well, always rests in the hands of the people. But he gets called. Craven's on the loose at the Brooklyn Zoo, which takes care of that. That Night Cave, Sam is there, but and Redwing is killed by an energy blast from the Goblin, who then takes Falcon prisoner. We get a nod to an older, a classic Amazing Spider-Man cover. I can't remember the number for the life of me, but it's got Goblin flying away on his glider while carrying a bound Spider-Man behind it, a bound Peter Parker behind him with his Spider-Man outfit clearly showing through his civilian clothes. Nighthawk discovers this. They go to the bridge, the fight ensues. Nighthawk tries to stay. Commissioner Cage shows up, as does Captain Stacy. They both have different views on how to handle things. But the Goblin tosses Sam off the bridge. Nighthawk tries to save him, but snaps his neck. Nighthawk and the Goblin duke it out. But instead of Goblin being impaled on his glider, Nighthawk smashes the glider takes a shard of it and very nearly uses it to kill the Goblin. Then he remembers what he said in front of the house and turns him over to Commissioner Cage, and he goes off. There's a candlelight vigil for Falcon, which Nighthawk doesn't attend. Instead, he sits brooding in his cave. That is where the issue ends. And wow. Seriously, Heroes Reborn is better than it has any right to be. Yeah. Like, I'm almost gonna be sad to see this reality end. Just because I want to read these stories. The heroes are detestable. The heroes tend to be other detestable, but I want to read more of this universe. Anyway, moving on to our next one. We got American Knights. So I mentioned Commissioner Cage, but in the beginning we meet a masked vigilante in red who appears to be beating on people. But we find out that Luke Cage was falsely imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit when he was younger. He became a cop to make sure that didn't happen to anyone else. But Manny Rich gets brought in, tossed into a cell with Commissioner Cage, who asks him some very pointed questions, and then half an hour later, Nighthawk arrives. And the commissioner tells it. It's very much a Commissioner Gordon Batman type of thing. But tells them that apparently organized crime boss Turk Barrett is meeting with Gunter later on. Or the next night, location and everything else that Nighthawk will need. But apparently Nighthawk left him a present. And apparently the media has a name, however, for the red-clad vigilante, the Saint, due to the stylized S he apparently wears on his chest. But Turk Barrett's having a family chili lunch, but he's informed of that Richie's been taken captive and apparently was interrogated by Commissioner Cage. Makes a call to another cop to take down Commissioner Cage. Later on that morning, we find out just who it was that got laid into the previous night by the Saint. Lonnie Tombstone Lincoln. Investigating the assault are detectives Jessica Jones and Misty Knight. There's clearly history, so Cage and Jones do not get along. That is plain to see. But apparently Tombstone's a worshiper of frequents the house of Mephisto. So they go to the local one where they meet cleric Matthew Murdoch. Commissioner Cage and Lieutenant Sanders, the officer who is hired by Turk to take out Cage, appear together on an afternoon talk show called DC Talk, where they have some similar views, but Sanders is a bit more extreme, and Cage puts him in his place. At the hospital, Detectives Knight and Jones go to hopefully talk to Lonnie Lincoln, and run into Cleric Murdoch on his way out. Upon arriving in Lincoln's room, they find him dead, The officer who had been on guard explains the only person coming was the priest. That night, well, Sanders has his SWAT team ready outside the Church of Mephisto, the House of Mephisto, after apparently Murdoch smashed up Misty Knight's cybernetic arm. But Cage goes to make sure it doesn't turn bloody. Nighthawk breaks up an arms deal between Turk and Gunter. And Turk basically says, hey, yeah, while you're taking me on, I got someone who's going to take out your buddy Cage. But Cage goes in to talk to Matt. Manages to talk him down and explains that his name isn't the Saint. He calls himself the Serpent. Because Mephisto took the form of this lowly creature when he wanted to experience life in his creation. But Cage talks him down, and apparently he's been driven. Hearing people basically confess to him all the time and confess their horrible deeds, well, it got them because they're just confessing so they can go do it again. But Sanders is ready to take down the Saint and Commissioner Cage in a hail of gunfire, but he only manages to take down one of his targets, Murdoch. As turns out that the gift left by Nighthawk for Commissioner Cage was some enhanced body armor. Also, Nighthawk shows up, having let Turk go. Sanders is fired. And he suggests that, and explains that he wasn't sure how well the body armor was going to work, but it was a prototype after all. But he suggests that the Commissioner hang on to it. He's got a feeling that the Commissioner just might need it. And that is where the story ends. Again, I mean, this has been just, of interesting note, though. This makes for at least the second alternate Marvel universe has truly been fleshed out, wherein Luke Cage was a cop. In the Earth X reality, he was, after all, Sergeant Cage. And Marvel's X kind of detailed how he went from being Luke Cage, Hero for Hire, to being Sergeant Cage. But yeah, so that's our Heroes Reborn books, and like I keep saying, it's better than it has any right to be, and I'm here for it. I'm really here for it. It's going to be interesting to see how it ends, and I'm glad we're at least getting something with the Squadron. There was actually supposed to be a Squadron Supreme of America one-shot, I believe, maybe miniseries for Empire, but as with quite a few event ties from Marvel from last year, with the pandemic, it was like, you know what, let's just not. So, but anyway, moving on to our next book, we've got Savage Avengers number 21. Where we left off, Conan had taken up residence in the Hellfire Club. Temporarily, at least, for the duration of his stay in this time. Logan said he'd clear it with everyone else, so he'd square it with the rest of Krakoa. The issue begins with Conan having a nightmare where the rest of the Savage Avengers had fallen to Kulan-Gath, and it was just him left. He wakes in the club with the company of a pair of young ladies he seems to have picked up for the evening, and tosses a painting of the former Black King himself into the fire. When Emma Frost arrives, she can't exactly complain about him destroying a painting of the Black King. Though, turns out she's not actually there, but rather an illusion. And it turns out that basically Wolverine asked her, "Hey, look, I got a favor." Asked her for a favor. Buddy of mine staying in the Hellfire Club, in the old Hellfire Club place. So let him stick around till he's done. Till he's done with this stuff. Till he goes home. And well, Logan's not one to ask for favors often, so the fact that Logan now owes her is a bit seductive. But as Emma leaves, she tells Conan she hopes that he has as much fun in the Hellfire Club as she did when she lived there. But he goes for a walk. And he passes by a building, and it's terrible. Terrible things are happening to people in there. So he goes in to try and figure out what's going on. People are claiming, they appear to all be dealing with severe nightmares. When Ghost Rider shows up, looking for Kulan Gath, but the reason being that, yeah, okay, Conan does have the stench of Kulan Gath on him, multiple ways over. Conan has fought Goth multiple times. He carried with him a symbiote weapon that was tortured by Kulan Gath for centuries. And supposedly, Kulan Gath poisoned the original Savage Avengers with a spell that would someday force them to bend the knee to him. So that's likely why Ghost Rider has taken interest. But they duke it out. Turns out that Conan encountered a spirit of vengeance back in the Hyborian Age, who rode on a giant friggin' spider. How cool is that? He encountered him one time when he was hired to kill a mad king. The spirit of vengeance at the time took care of the king, and well, Conan kept the coin. But they both get affected. Ghost Rider tries to use his penance stare on Conan, but he ends up just getting the stuck in the whole night. The night where presumably, if it's a waking nightmare, I'm guessing nightmare is involved. But then again, he tries to use the penance stare. But this time, Conan sticks his thumbs into the eye sockets of Ghost Rider, and there's a flash of light. He finds himself back in Aquilonia, the Hyborian Age. And that is where the issue ends. Which brings us to our next book for the week. Iron Man Annual number 1, kicking off the Infinite Destinies annuals. Now, these were actually supposed to be last year's annuals, but, well, again, global pandemic. So the basic gist is the Infinity Stones. After Infinity Wars, they went to choose their own bearers. Recent Captain Marvel villain Star, for example, has the Reality Stone, a former death row inmate has the Time Stone. But what are the other 4? So, we begin with Iron Man and Miles Morales taking on a bunch of moloids in Brooklyn. They're not invading, they're tourists. They're just moloids that, grew up watching, Surface World TV. They're not trying, Mole Man isn't being all, hey, let's go invade the world. Like, no, they just, they want to, they want to see Kramer. They want to see Carrie Bradshaw. They want to see Seinfeld. So Tony just makes a call, gets some food trucks sent out, and food trucks and tourist trucks, or tourist buses, so yeah. But Miles tells him about his run-in with the assessor. And I think it's kind of fascinating. You know, a tech bad guy that he hasn't heard of. I mean, you know, of course, you know, obvious. I say, you know, yeah. He of course finds what was done to Miles to be reprehensible, but he's also, you know, it's like it is at the same time. It's like, okay, this is, you know, tech is totally my wheelhouse. I need to know who the tech people are. So, and in fact, Miles thought maybe Iron Man knew of the assessor previously, but yeah, he does some. He looks into a drone that Bombshell and Miles destroyed, traces its signal back to a location in Brooklyn. Goes after the assessor's thugs, two waves of them before dealing with Quantum, who is able to punch Tony from across the room through the armor. But he gets captured, and so the assessor begins to, well, assess him. The assessment, the trials, the parameters of the trials are adjusted due to Iron Man's intractable nature. He's put through a wind tunnel with, but yeah, he deals with the wind tunnel, various other things, and he explains that, yeah, you know, he realizes this is, you know, basically just like the cave he was held in all those years ago when he made the armor. The difference is he deserved to be in that cave. Miles didn't deserve to be put through anything like that, like what he's been going through right now. And so he makes his way through, and then was able to quantumly entangle himself with Quantum, the assessor's henchman, for 3 minutes before copying the assessor's programming and seemingly destroying him. Elsewhere, however, Quantum appears, and a backup of the assessor shows up. And we discover that the source of Quantum's power is the Space Stone in his chest. And that he's only working for the assessor so they can see about removing it. And that's where that story ends. All of the Infinite Destinies annuals were going to include a backup story called Infinite Fury, which focuses on Nick Fury Jr., who has a friggin' speeder bike. But he reflects on who he is and how he became who he is. But he starts looking, and also, you know, how he sees information. And things like, you know, Hydra telltales in financial markets, tectonic rumblings of AIM activity in comment sections of scientific journals. There's Maria Hill, her signature in the movement of the data, clear as day for someone who knows her like he does. And that's how he sees the world and the future and what he has to deal with next. But what worries him is that he's seeing something he doesn't recognize. A new player out there, they're making ripples in the data, dangerous ripples. He doesn't know who they are, and he doesn't know what they're doing, not exactly, but he can already tell. This is going to be Fury business. Also, all these are going to be leading into an upcoming Black Cat story arc entitled Infinity Heist. I think Felicia's going after the gems. Which brings us to our last comic for the video, Nocterra Oh yes. Before we get to Nocterra, the Iron Man annual. It. I really hope with this being having with the annuals kind of having like a set story that this is the kind of thing that these are annuals will actually mean something. Usually, annuals mean dick. No one ever hardly get referenced again. In fact, there's a gimmick. There was usual just to sell annuals. Marvel generally has a gimmick going. A couple of years ago, the last batch of annuals from the ones from 2019, it was kind of a read not. It was basically kind of like an homage to Acts of Vengeance. Acts of Vengeance having been another annual story wherein various villains took on heroes that they don't usually fight. These annuals did the same thing. You had like the Punisher taking on the Brood, Venom taking on an intergalactic hunter, so on and so forth. But yeah, and the thing is, they didn't matter. They've never been referenced since. In fact, probably one of the biggest gimmicks Marvel ever did when it came to annuals was in 1993. Every Marvel annual introduced a new character. Off the top of my head, two of them made it out of the annuals. By which I mean two of them were used in comics afterwards. And in fact have been utilized, recently. Executioner from the Uncanny X-Men annual that year, and Adam X the Extreme from the X-Force annual that year. Yeah. None of the, to the best of my knowledge, to the best of my recollection, none of the others ever did. But yeah, I like I said, I really do. I think with the fact that this is leading into at least a story arc in one of Marvel's ongoing books, kind of sets the idea that yes, this is something that is going to matter later. So, fingers crossed. It was a fun annual though, but it doesn't feel like it really means anything at the moment. So yeah. Anyway, I'm hoping, like I said, hopefully I'll be proven wrong by in the coming months. Moving on, though, we've got Nocterra number 4. Where we left off, Nocterra had a run with Blacktop Bill, and her rig had gotten damaged. Gus, her man who hired her, had surrendered himself to her as a distraction. And her brother was getting worse, getting closer and closer, turning into a shade. We began with a flashback to day 6 of the Big PM. We learned that on the 4th day of the Big PM, federal refuges were set up, malls and stands outfitted with heavy-duty lights, staff, doctors, and soldiers. Local news stations were telling people to go to the nearest one as soon as possible. If you didn't have transportation, wait in your home because the military was doing sweeps. Day 5, the news reported rumors that some centers had collapsed, and on the 6th day, all broadcasts ended forever. And they stopped thinking in days anymore. But Sundog and her brother Emery, their parents are changing. And Emery's got their dad's gun. Power goes out. The truck they heard, she explains, what she heard was they heard it leave. And the president, they're trying to save off the change. As Sundog, Emery, and their passenger arrive in Tipton, which used to be a travel hub where all the lost luggage got sent. But they take out a shade. Turns out that an associate of hers, Hill Dill, at least had something that could potentially help Emery. He also had some shadefish, which is explained are the least awful tasting meat out there. But Emery is changing fast, and he does attack his sister and their passenger. But a sun lamp manages to save him off. Elsewhere, Bellwether's trying to get information on Blacktop Bill, and so she asks Mother Hubbard. Mother Hubbard cuts her off, says, hey, signs off completely, goes to a private channel, says, okay, can't talk about him on the airwaves, but apparently his story starts in Florida before the big PM. The harpoon that Bill utilized on the truck aged the rig's battery by about a decade, so it won't hold a charge. Bill is talking to his employer, while Gus is tied to the roof, changing and shouting to be killed. But the rig dies, and they come across some shades. They do what they can to take them down, but then they escape. And, well, only one thing really stops animal shades from attacking. The presence of human shades. But something else comes along. Before the human shades come along, they're saved by Gus's brother, Tiberius. So they collect Emery, bring him to the Tiberius, and Sundog explains she sees something she hasn't seen in 13 years. Something defied belief. She saw sunshine. And that's where the issue ends. Nocterra continues to be a solid book. The world that Scott Snyder is building is just I love the way they're doing it. Oftentimes, and this may end up turning out to be a problem later on as the series continues, but oftentimes when you get into something new and it's a completely new universe, what happens is that elements of that universe of the backstory of that universe get brought in when necessary. Kind of like, oh, well, we need to explain this, so let's do a flashback. But so far, every issue of Nocterra has had a flashback, at least in the early days of the big PM, and that's great. I get the feeling next issue, we're likely going to get that flashback on Blacktop Bill, or sometime soon. Hell, there might even be an entire issue devoted to the story of Blacktop Bill. But it's so good. I love Scott Snyder's work. The way his Vertigo series, The Wake, his run on Batman, Death Metal, yeah. Anyway, that's it for now. As always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Links to my Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, and PayPal account in the description box down below. This is Rock and Roll Spock signing off, saying live long and rock hard.